What if you could walk through life completely untouched by insults, betrayal, or negativity, not because you're numb, but because you've mastered the art of emotional invincibility? You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. Gautama Buddha. This profound truth reveals that our suffering doesn't come from what others do to us, but from how we react to it. The Buddha taught that pain is inevitable, but emotional devastation is optional. When someone insults you, betrays you, or tries to break your spirit, the real damage isn't caused by their words or actions. It's created by your own mind's attachment, resistance, and unchecked reactions. In this video, you'll learn 18 ancient Buddhist secrets that act as an invisible shield against emotional harm. These aren't just philosophical ideas. They're mental weapons tested for over 2,600 years. By the end, you'll know how to let insults pass through you, like arrows through mist, leaving no wound. Disarm toxic people without confrontation, using silent wisdom. Turn pain into power by mastering the art of non-reactive awareness. Detach from drama while staying fully engaged in life. Build emotional armor so strong that no one's negativity can shake your inner peace. Imagine a life where criticism feels like background noise, not a personal attack. Betrayal becomes a lesson, not a lifelong wound. Your happiness no longer depends on others' behavior. This isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming cold. It's about transforming vulnerability into unshakable strength. The Buddha's teachings reveal that the root of all emotional suffering is resistance, and the path to freedom lies in rewiring your mind. If you're ready to live with effortless resilience, where no one can manipulate, guilt trip, or emotionally destabilize you, these 18 lessons will change how you move through the world. This is the art of being untouchable, not through aggression, but through profound inner mastery. Let's begin. The shield of mindfulness, becoming the unshakable observer. Within, imagine standing before a mirror while someone hurls paint at its surface. Vivid reds of anger, murky blues of hurt, violent splashes of betrayal, all splash across the glass, yet leave the mirror itself untouched. This is the essence of mindfulness, what the Buddha called sati, the sacred practice of becoming the calm witness to your own experience rather than being swept away by life's emotional storms. Modern neuroscience reveals why this ancient practice remains so profoundly relevant today. When someone insults or provokes you, your brain's amygdala, that ancient alarm system wired for survival, triggers within milliseconds, flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline. This biological hijacking explains why harsh words can feel like physical blows to our system. But here lies the revolutionary truth. Between the external trigger and your internal reaction exists a precious half-second gap. Mindfulness training transforms this brief window into a spacious sanctuary of conscious choice. Consider the real-world example of a Fortune 500 CEO who maintained a rigorous meditation practice. When a business rival launched a smear campaign against her, colleagues braced for an explosive reaction. Instead, she responded with disarming serenity. I've examined these accusations. They reveal more about the speaker than about reality. Her composed response wasn't weakness. It was emotional aikido at its finest, using the attacker's energy to expose their own instability. This demonstrates the paradox at the heart of mindfulness. By consciously choosing not to react, we reveal the fundamental emptiness of verbal attacks. The Buddha's Vitakkasanthana Sutta offers 5 powerful strategies for working with painful thoughts and emotions that arise during challenging interactions. First, we can consciously replace toxic thoughts with their antidotes, countering "I'm worthless" with "I've survived 100% of my worst days so far." Second, we can forensically examine the insult, asking what kernel of truth it might contain, while discarding the emotional chaff. Third, we can starve harmful thoughts of attention, understanding that what we resist persists, but what we observe dissolves. Fourth, we can trace the roots of our reactions, recognizing when current hurts trigger older wounds from our past. Finally, we can consciously override destructive patterns through disciplined practice, much like an athlete trains new muscle memory. For practical application, try the 3 gates of speech challenge. Before responding to provocation, pause to ask, is what I'm about to say completely true? Is it genuinely necessary to voice? And is it truly kind, both to others and to myself? You'll be amazed how many potential conflicts evaporate under this simple scrutiny. A Tibetan monk once shared with me this profound truth: pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is always optional. Mindfulness doesn't numb us to life's difficulties. Rather, it grants us X-ray vision to see through the illusion of permanent, solid emotions. Like thunderstorms, even our most intense emotions arise, play out their drama, and inevitably pass. Your fundamental awareness is like the sky, vast, unchanging, and inherently untouched by whatever weather patterns move through it. Here's a practical experiment. For the next 24 hours, imagine wearing an invisible crown, inscribed with the words, "I am the witness." Each time you feel provoked, physically touch your head and silently remind yourself, this is a passing experience, not my essential identity. Keep a journal of how many potential conflicts dissolve before they even begin when you approach them from this place of centered awareness. True emotional armor isn't forged from steel or brute force, but woven from the golden threads of present moment awareness. As you cultivate this practice, you'll discover an extraordinary truth. No external event or harsh word can disturb your peace unless you unconsciously grant it that power. The shield of mindfulness, diligently polished through daily practice, becomes your greatest protection in a world that often mistakes reaction for strength and stillness for weakness. The armor of non-attachment, becoming unshakable in a world of praise and blame. Imagine a leaf floating on the surface of a river. It doesn't resist the current, nor does it cling to passing branches. It simply moves with the water, untouched by compliments when the river flows smoothly, or insults when the rapids come. This is the essence of non-attachment, a cornerstone of Buddhist wisdom that teaches us how to remain unshaken by the ever-changing opinions of others. The Buddhas called this anupadana, the freedom that comes when we stop grasping at praise and recoiling from criticism. Modern psychology confirms what ancient sages knew. Our suffering doesn't come from what others think of us, but from our desperate need for their approval. Think of the last time someone's harsh words kept you awake at night, or how a fleeting compliment made your entire day brighter. Why do we give so much power to external validation? Neuroscience reveals that our brains are wired to seek social approval, a survival mechanism from our tribal past, when exclusion meant danger. But in today's world, this instinct backfires. The same neural pathways that once protected us now leave us vulnerable to manipulation, swinging between pride and shame based on others' whims. Non-attachment isn't indifference. It's the conscious decision to stop handing strangers the remote control to your self-worth. Consider the story of a famous artist who, after years of craving acclaim, suddenly withdrew from the public eye. When asked why, he replied, "I used to paint for applause. Now, I paint because the act itself is my joy." His shift captures the essence of non-attachment. When we stop depending on external validation, we reclaim our inner freedom. This doesn't mean rejecting kindness or constructive feedback, but rather seeing praise and blame for what they truly are, passing clouds in the vast sky of our awareness. One day you're celebrated, the next you're criticized. Neither defines you. The Buddha's teachings in the Aggi-Vacchagotta Sutta illustrate this with striking clarity. When a wanderer asked whether enlightened beings rejoice in praise, the Buddha responded, "They are like the earth, unmoved by what is thrown upon it, be it flowers or filth." This is the armor of non-attachment, the unshakable understanding that your worth is inherent, not earned or lost through others' opinions. Modern psychology echoes this in the concept of self-determination theory, which shows that people who act from intrinsic motivation rather than chasing approval experience deeper fulfillment and resilience. So how do we cultivate this in daily life? Start by noticing where you're still holding on. When someone compliments your work, do you feel a rush of validation? Or can you appreciate it without needing it? When criticized, do you spiral into self-doubt? Or can you weigh the feedback without letting it shake your core? Try this simple practice. For 1 week, keep a journal of every time you seek or react strongly to external validation. Write down the situation, your emotional response, and then ask, if no one ever knew about this, would it still matter to me? You'll begin to see just how much of your energy is spent chasing approval that in the end changes nothing about your true value. The Zen master Seng Tsan wrote, "If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything." This is the ultimate freedom of non-attachment, the ability to move through the world without being hooked by praise or paralyzed by blame. When you stop clinging to what others think, you become immune to manipulation. Flattery loses its power to inflate your ego. Insults fail to wound. You're no longer a puppet on the strings of others' opinions, but a sovereign being, grounded in unshakable self-knowledge. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached from relationships. On the contrary, non-attachment allows you to connect more authentically because you're no longer using others as mirrors to reflect back your worth. You can love without needing to be loved in return, give without demanding gratitude, and speak your truth without fear of rejection. That is true emotional invincibility. So the next time someone praises you, smile and thank them. Then let it go, like a leaf dropping into a stream. When criticism comes, examine it for truth, discard the rest, and keep walking. Your worth was never in their hands to begin with. As the ancient Stoics said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Non-attachment is that strength. It's the armor that lets you walk through the world untouched, not because you're numb, but because you're finally free. The sword of compassion, disarming cruelty with radical empathy. Imagine standing before a snarling dog, teeth bared, hackles raised. Your instinct might be to shout, to throw a stone, to meet aggression with aggression. But what if you notice the thorn embedded in its paw? Suddenly the animal's fury makes sense. It's not evil, but in pain. This is the essence of the Buddhist teaching on compassion. When we recognize that people hurt others, we disarm their cruelty at its source. The Buddha called this karuna, not passive pity, but an active force that transforms anger into understanding. Neuroscience now confirms this ancient wisdom. When we respond to hostility with empathy, we literally rewire both our brains and the dynamic of conflict. The person who lashes out isn't powerful. They're drowning in their own suffering. and their words are flailing attempts to stay afloat. Consider the story of a school teacher who faced a student that disrupted class daily with cruel remarks. Instead of punishment, she asked him privately, "You must be carrying something heavy to want to throw rocks at others. Do you want to talk about it?" The boy burst into tears. His father had just been imprisoned. This is compassion as a strategic weapon. By refusing to take the bait of anger, she exposed the real wound beneath the behavior. The insults stopped because she'd robbed them of their power, not through force, but through fearless empathy. Studies in restorative justice show this pattern consistently. When victims confront offenders with honest curiosity rather than retaliation, recidivism rates plummet. Why? Because no one can sustain cruelty when met with unflinching humanity. The Metta Sutta, the Buddha's discourse on loving kindness, reveals why this works on a neurological level. When we silently wish, "May you be free from suffering," even to those who hurt us, we activate the vagus nerve, the body's compassion circuit, which 1. Lowers our heart rate and stress hormones. 2. Releases oxytocin, the bonding chemical that dissolves us versus them. Thinking 3. Primes the prefrontal cortex for creative problem solving rather than primal fighting. This isn't theoretical. MRI scans of Tibetan monks show their brains light up differently when faced with hostility. Their amygdala, fear center, remains quiet, while their insula, empathy center, fires intensely. Through training, they've learned to see aggression as a cry for help rather than a threat. Try this experiment next time you're insulted. 1. Pause. Create space between trigger and reaction. 2. Visualize the person as a wounded child. All cruelty is recycled pain. 3. Ask silently, what hurt must they carry to act this way? You'll notice something extraordinary. Their words lose their sting because you've stopped receiving them as truth and started seeing them as symptoms. Like a doctor viewing a patient's fever, not as a personal attack, but as evidence of infection, you become diagnostically curious rather than emotionally reactive. A powerful example comes from post-genocide Rwanda, where survivors sat face to face with those who murdered their families. Instead of revenge, many chose to ask, "Why did you do it? What were you told about us? Do you dream of your actions?" These questions, rooted in compassionate inquiry, disarmed decades of hatred more effectively than any punishment. As one survivor explained, "Their shame became my liberation. I refused to let their brokenness break me too." This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or abandoning boundaries. True compassion includes fierce protection for yourself and others. When the Buddha was verbally attacked by a man named Akosaka, he replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, who does it belong to?" The man said, "The giver." The Buddha smiled. "Then I refuse your anger." Here lies the sword's double edge. Compassion both disarms the attacker and fortifies the recipient. Practice this today. When someone is rude, imagine writing an invisible backstory for them. She's grieving. He feels powerless at work. They've never known safe love. You'll find your irritation replaced with something far more powerful. The invincibility that comes when you stop mistaking other people's pain for your problem. Their words become echoes of their inner world, not definitions of yours. Ultimately, compassion is the ultimate alchemy. It transforms the lead of hatred into the gold of understanding. Wield this sword wisely, and you'll discover what the Buddha knew. No one can diminish you without your consent. And when you stop fighting fire with fire, the whole world cools. The mirror of impermanence, finding freedom in life's fleeting storms. Imagine standing on a windswept cliff As a thunderstorm rolls in, the sky darkens, rain lashes your face, lightning splits the horizon, yet you remain unmoved because you know with absolute certainty that this storm will pass. This is the power of understanding anicca, the Buddhist teaching of impermanence that reveals all experiences, no matter how intense, are temporary visitors in the vast sky of our awareness. Modern psychology confirms what monks have known for millennia. Our suffering doesn't come from pain itself, but from the illusion that it will last forever. When we internalize that every emotion, every conflict, every heartache is by nature fleeting, we gain supernatural resilience. A groundbreaking Harvard study found that when people simply label their emotions as temporary, their distress decreases by 50%, almost instantly. The thought, "this too shall pass," isn't just poetic, it's neurologically transformative. Consider the story of a woman who survived a brutal assault. During her darkest moments, she repeated the phrase, "Even this is changing," like a mantra. At first, it felt like a lie. The trauma seemed endless, but over time, she noticed subtle shifts. The nightmares grew shorter, the panic attacks less frequent. By observing her pain as weather patterns rather than permanent climate, she avoided the trap of identifying with her suffering. Buddhist psychology calls this the wisdom of the mirror. Just as a mirror reflects images without being stained by them, our awareness can observe emotions without becoming them. Neuroscience now shows this practice literally rewires the brain. MRI scans reveal that people who view emotions as passing phenomena develop thicker insula cortices, the region responsible for emotional regulation, making them objectively less reactive to life's storms. The Bhattacharya Sutta offers a powerful tool for applying this wisdom: the three-moment practice. When overwhelming emotion arises, 1. Pause and name it. This is anger, not me. 2. Visualize it as a shape starts color, moving through space. 3. Whisper, already changing, as you exhale. This creates psychological distance, allowing you to have feelings without being them. Like watching a train roar by from the safety of a platform, you maintain the crucial understanding: you are not the train. History's wisest figures have used this principle to survive unimaginable hardships. Viktor Frankl, who endured Nazi concentration camps, wrote that his lifeline was realizing no suffering is eternal, only our attitude toward it. Tibetan monks imprisoned by Chinese authorities report singing mantras as their cells flooded, watching the rising water with curiosity rather than terror, because they knew, like all phenomena, it would eventually recede. This isn't denial. It's the profound recognition that everything arises and passes, even despair. Try this today. Carry a small stone in your pocket. Each time you touch it, ask, "What am I mistaking for permanent right now?" You'll discover most suffering comes from mentally freezing temporary experiences into forever states. A breakup feels like, "I'll always be alone." A job loss becomes, "I'll never recover." An insult twists into, "They'll always see me this way." Impermanence awareness melts these mental ice sculptures back into their true nature, passing streams, not frozen monuments. The Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, embodies this teaching beautifully. The cracks aren't hidden. They're illuminated, becoming part of the object's evolving story. Likewise, when we stop fearing emotional fractures and start trusting their impermanence, our scars become sources of luminosity rather than shame. Ultimately, this mirror reflects a liberating truth. You are the sky, vast, unchanging, and inherently untouched. Not the weather moving through you, storm clouds of grief, hurricanes of anger, drizzles of boredom. All will dissolve in time. The more deeply you internalize this, the more you'll navigate life with unshakable poise, knowing no darkness lasts forever. As the ancient Pali chant reminds us, all that arises ceases. This is peace. This is freedom. Hold this mirror up to your darkest moments and watch as they lose their power to define you. The boundary of right speech, wielding words as sacred tools. Imagine your words as living entities, each syllable carrying the power to heal or harm, to build bridges or burn them down. The Buddha taught Samavaka, right speech, not as a moral commandment, but as a practical shield against the invisible violence of careless language. Neuroscience now confirms this ancient wisdom. Negative speech releases cortisol in both speaker and listener, while compassionate words trigger oxytocin, the bonding hormone that lowers stress and builds trust. Right speech isn't about politeness. It's about recognizing language as psychic architecture. Every sentence constructs either a prison or a sanctuary. Consider the case of a corporate team that eliminated gossip for 30 days. Managers reported a 37% increase in productivity, while anonymous surveys revealed startling drops in anxiety. This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Abhaya Sutta, where he outlines speech's fourfold test. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Does it come at the right time? Modern research shows teams using this framework experience 52% fewer conflicts. When you refuse to participate in toxic narratives, even through passive listening, you become what linguists call a conversational architect, silently redirecting dialogue toward higher ground. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh demonstrated this during peace talks when he transformed heated debates by simply pausing to say, "Friends, are we certain our words reflect reality or just our wounds?" Right speech becomes revolutionary when applied to self-talk. The average person speaks to themselves with a cruelty they'd never use on others, a phenomenon psychologists call the inner critic loophole. Buddhist psychology treats this as a violation of the first speech precept, truthfulness to oneself. Try this experiment. For one day, document your mental commentary as if it were spoken by an external voice. You'll likely discover shocking patterns, catastrophizing, "I always fail," mind reading, "They think I'm stupid," and other cognitive distortions that would be unacceptable if spoken aloud. The Vitakka Santhana Sutta offers an antidote, replacing toxic self-talk with appropriate attention, consciously redirecting thoughts, like a gardener uprooting weeds to plant flowers. The most potent application of right speech lies in strategic silence. The Buddha praised noble silence not as suppression, but as the sword that cuts through deception. When confronted with gossip, try the 3-breath practice. Inhale while mentally asking, "Is this conversation useful?" Hold while considering, "What purpose does repeating this serve?" Exhale with either a mindful redirection, "Let's discuss solutions instead," or graceful exit. Social psychology confirms what monks have long known. Groups instinctively mirror the highest standard of communication present. By consistently modeling right speech, you become a linguistic thermostat, silently regulating the emotional temperature around you. Historical figures like Gandhi and Mandela wielded this power under extreme provocation. Mandela's prison guards reported he never spoke harshly, even during solitary confinement. Yet, his measured words eventually dismantled apartheid. This exemplifies the meta, loving-kindness dimension of right speech. Truth delivered without malice carries revolutionary force. When you decline to weaponize language, even when provoked, you expose aggression's emptiness like sunlight revealing dust motes in air. Practice this today. Carry a small notebook to tally speech violations, yours and others. Note each instance of gossip, exaggeration, or harshness without judgment. By day's end, you'll possess a map of linguistic energy leaks and the power to rebuild your conversations from the ground up. Ultimately, right speech is alchemy, transforming verbal lead into gold. Your words become either karmic chains or liberating mantras. Choose wisely and watch as your life becomes a sanctuary where anger starves and understanding flourishes. As the Dhammapada teaches, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Speak that word today. The fortress of self-respect, building an inner citadel against external judgments. Imagine constructing an impenetrable castle within yourself, its walls forged from unshakable self-knowledge, its gates guarded by discernment, its towers illuminated by the steady flame of self-worth. This is the essence of true self-respect in Buddhist practice. Not the fragile armor of ego that cracks under pressure, but the unassailable understanding that your value exists prior to anyone else's opinion. The Buddha taught that all human suffering stems from moha, delusion, and perhaps no delusion is more pervasive than believing we need external validation to confirm our inherent worth. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies show that people with strong self-concept experience verbal insults as mere noise, their brain scans revealing minimal amygdala activation compared to those who rely on others for self-definition. Consider the story of a celebrated violinist who, after a flawless performance, was approached by a critic who sneered, "Your interpretation was completely wrong." Without missing a beat, the musician replied, "How fascinating that you heard it that way," and walked away. This exemplifies the fortress mentality. When you've done the inner work of genuine self-assessment, others' critiques become curious data points rather than existential threats. Neuroscientists call this cognitive immunity, a state where the prefrontal cortex overrides the limbic system's panic response. The Buddha achieved this through attavipassana, self-observation, training his disciples to ask, "Who am I when no one is praising or blaming me?" This question, meditated upon deeply, reveals the luminous awareness beneath all transient identities. The practice of building this fortress involves three-layered defenses. First, the moat of mindfulness, creating space between stimulus and reaction. When insulted, instead of reflexively absorbing the attack, ask, "Does this align with what I know to be true about myself?" Second, the walls of wise comparison, measuring yourself only against your own potential, never others' achievements. The Saleka Sutta warns against comparing mind as the thief of inner peace. Third, the inner sanctum of unconditional worth, the radical understanding that your value isn't earned through accomplishments or approval, but exists intrinsically like the sun behind clouds. History's most resilient figures share this trait. When Eleanor Roosevelt was told, "No one likes you," by a political rival, she responded, "Then I'll have to like myself enough for everyone." This mirrors the Buddhist concept of atma prasamsa, self-appreciation, not as arrogance, but as the sober recognition that outsourcing your self-worth is spiritual suicide. Modern therapy modalities like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, now teach versions of this ancient wisdom, helping clients develop what psychologists call self as context, the ability to witness criticism without being defined by it. Try this concrete exercise. Create a self-respect ledger. Each evening, record 3 things you did that aligned with your values, e.g., spoke up for a colleague, resisted gossip, practiced patience. Not achievements, integrity moments. Over time, This becomes empirical evidence of your worth, making external validation irrelevant. When insulted, review recent entries. You'll find insults slide off, like rain on a waxed surface. The ultimate test comes when facing those who once held power over your self-esteem: a critical parent, an abusive ex, a bullying boss. Meet them now with what Tibetan Buddhism calls ziji, the radiant confidence that comes from knowing your own mind. You'll discover their words now echo hollowly, like shouts in an empty cathedral. This isn't indifference. It's the profound freedom of having repatriated your worth. As the Dhammapada teaches, first establish yourself in what is proper, then teach others. Your fortress of self-respect becomes not just personal protection, but a beacon for others struggling in the storm of external judgments. And when enough individuals awaken to this truth, the whole world shifts from a marketplace of validation-seeking to a sangha of self-sovereign beings. Build your inner citadel well, and no emotional siege can ever breach your peace. The fire of forgiveness, transforming poison into liberation. Imagine holding a red-hot coal in your bare hand, its searing heat burning your flesh, while the person who gave it to you walks away unscathed. This visceral image captures the Buddha's teaching on resentment, that holding on to anger harms only the holder. The Pali word khanti, forbearance, doesn't mean passive acceptance of harm, but rather the conscious decision to stop letting past wounds dictate present suffering. Neuroscience now confirms this ancient wisdom. MRI scans show that practicing forgiveness reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while strengthening the prefrontal cortex, literally upgrading your brain from reactive to reflective. Forgiveness isn't about condoning wrongs. It's about refusing to let someone else's actions continue to hurt you long after they occurred. Consider the case of a Holocaust survivor who forgave her Nazi tormentor, not because he deserved it, but because, as she explained, "I refused to let him live rent-free in my mind any longer." Her choice exemplifies the Buddhist paradox. Forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-interest. The Akosa Sutta tells of a man who insulted the Buddha daily, until one day he asked why the enlightened one never reacted. The Buddha replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse it, to whom does the gift belong?" The answer, the giver, reveals forgiveness's secret power. By refusing to accept the emotional poison of resentment, you leave it with its original owner. Modern therapeutic modalities, like REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, now use this exact framework, teaching clients that while we can't control others' actions, we always control what emotional gifts we accept. The process of true forgiveness follows 3 alchemical stages, mirroring the Buddhist path of purification. First comes vipassana, clear seeing, acknowledging the hurt without minimization or exaggeration. A woman betrayed by her business partner might journal, "He stole $50,000 and broke trust. This happened, and it mattered." Second is metta, loving kindness practice, not toward the offender initially, but toward one's own wounded self. May I find peace with this. Finally comes sunyata, emptiness, realization, recognizing that clinging to resentment is like grasping at a mirage. The more tightly we hold, the less substance we find. Psychologists call this emotional decoupling, where memories lose their power to trigger fresh pain. A powerful modern example comes from Rwanda's post-genocide reconciliation courts. Perpetrators who showed genuine remorse faced victims' families, often hearing words like, "I bury your deeds with my dead, but I will not let your actions kill my future too." This reflects the Brahma Vihara, divine abode, of upekkha, equanimity, the ability to wish others neutral well-being without entanglement. Forensic research shows these forgiveness rituals reduced recidivism rates to just 6%, compared to 60% in conventional punitive systems. Try this 7-day forgiveness practice. Each morning, light a candle representing the situation you're releasing. Whisper, "For my freedom, I loosen this story." Each evening, extinguish it with, "I reclaim the energy this pain has consumed." By week's end, you'll notice physical lightness. Forgiveness isn't abstract, but somatic. The Pali Canon describes this as the unburdening of the heart's heavy load. Ultimately, Buddhist forgiveness is radical pragmatism. As the Dhammapada states, hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone is it healed. Not sentimental love, but the fierce love that chooses liberation over the sweet poison of resentment. When you stop drinking that poison, you discover an astonishing truth. The prison door was never locked. You were the one holding it shut all along. Walk free today and watch as life's bitterest chapters become compost for unimagined growth. The mountain of equanimity, standing unshaken in life's storms. Imagine a Himalayan peak at dawn. How the first sunlight touches its snowfields, while the valleys below remain shrouded in shadow. The mountain doesn't choose which storms to weather or which sunrises to enjoy. It simply stands, immutable, through seasons of tempest and tranquility. This is upekkha, the Buddhist quality of equanimity that the Buddha called the crowning jewel of the awakened mind. Modern neuroscience reveals why this mental state is so transformative. When we cultivate equanimity, our brainwaves shift from reactive beta states to balanced alpha rhythms, creating what researchers call the neutral gear effect, a mental state where we observe life's turbulence without being thrown off center. Consider the story of a veteran journalist covering war zones for decades. Colleagues marveled at her ability to report atrocities with clear-eyed compassion, then sleep soundly at night. Her secret? "I became a mountain. What happens in the valleys doesn't shake what I am." This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Aggi Sutta, where he describes the enlightened mind as unshaken by praise or blame, gain or loss, pleasure or pain. Unlike suppression or indifference, equanimity is full engagement without entanglement, the art of caring deeply while remaining fundamentally undisturbed. Studies of trauma surgeons and crisis negotiators show their brains exhibit this same pattern. Intense focus coupled with remarkable emotional regulation, allowing them to function optimally when others would collapse. The practice of equanimity unfolds in 3 layers, like a mountain's geological strata. At the base lies physical equanimity, training the body to remain still amid discomfort through practices like prolonged sitting meditation. Tibetan monks demonstrate this in Tummo, inner fire meditation, where they dry freezing wet sheets on their backs in Himalayan winters through breath control alone. The middle layer is emotional equanimity, using mindfulness to create space between feeling and reaction. When insulted, instead of lashing out, you might silently note arising anger. Temperature hot. Duration temporary. The summit is existential equanimity, the profound realization that beneath life's changing conditions, awareness itself remains untouched, like the mountain's bedrock beneath seasonal snows. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom through the pause principle. fMRI scans show that equanimity practitioners develop a distinctive neural signature. When provoked, their amygdala fear center activates briefly, then is quickly regulated by the prefrontal cortex wisdom center. This creates what neuroscientists call the sacred quarter second, the critical window where we choose response over reaction. Elite athletes Cultivate this through flow state training, learning to perform under extreme pressure with paradoxical calm. Try this daily equanimity workout. Set a phone alarm for random times. When it rings, freeze mid-action and scan your body-mind for subtle tensions, clenched jaw, racing thoughts, emotional residues. Then consciously relax each area while whispering, "This too is passing." Over time, you'll develop what Zen masters call the mirror mind, reflecting everything, clinging to nothing. History's greatest leaders demonstrate this quality. When Nelson Mandela emerged from 27 years in prison, he astonished the world by speaking of reconciliation, not revenge. "As I walked out the door toward my freedom," he said, "I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness behind, I'd still be in prison." This is equanimity's ultimate gift, the ability to walk through fire without carrying its burns into the future. The Visuddhimagga compares equanimity to a lotus leaf, untouched by water, fully immersed, yet fundamentally unstained. As you cultivate this mountain-like presence, you'll discover an astonishing truth. The chaos around you was never the problem. It was always your relationship to it that caused suffering. Stand firm in that knowing, and no storm can steal your peace. The detachment of loving without needing. The art of affection. Without chains, imagine holding a butterfly in your hands. Clench your fists, and you crush its wings. Open them completely, and it may fly away. But hold your palms cupped gently, neither grasping nor rejecting, and you create the perfect conditions for it to stay willingly. This is the essence of loving without needing, a concept the Buddha called anunaya, the delicate balance between deep caring and emotional freedom. Modern attachment theory confirms this ancient wisdom. Relationships thrive, not when they become oxygen we can't live without, but when they're treated as sunlight, precious yet not possessive. Neuroscience reveals why this approach protects us. When we make our happiness contingent on others' behavior, our brain's reward system becomes hijacked, flooding us with dopamine when loved ones comply and cortisol when they don't. The Buddhist path offers liberation from this roller coaster through metta, loving-kindness meditation, which trains the mind to love abundantly while releasing demands that the love be returned in specific ways. Consider the story of a mother whose son became addicted to drugs. After years of exhausting attempts to control his choices, she learned to say, "I love you unconditionally, but I cannot participate in your self-destruction." By withdrawing financial support while keeping her heart open, she stopped fueling his addiction while preserving their connection, a practice psychologists now call detachment with love. This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Samyutta Nikaya, where he compares wise love to the earth's relationship with plants, providing nourishment without demanding the seedlings grow in predetermined ways. Research on healthy marriages reveals a similar pattern. The strongest couples maintain what social scientists term secure attachment with autonomy, where partners support each other's growth without treating love as a binding contract. The practice of loving without needing unfolds in three transformative stages. First comes self-completion, the realization that wholeness must be found within before it can be shared. The Atadanda Sutta warns that seeking refuge in another is like building your house on another's foundation. Modern therapy echoes this in the concept of differentiation, the ability to stay emotionally connected while maintaining separate identities. Second is expectation alchemy, transforming "you must make me happy" into "I welcome whatever beauty our connection brings." A study of long-term meditators showed their brains respond to relationship stress with significantly less activation in the anterior insula, the disappointment center, than non-meditators. Finally comes the gift of spaciousness, what Zen calls Mu Shin, no mind. The ability to love without constantly monitoring the relationship's temperature. A powerful example comes from the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, not to hide the cracks, but to highlight them as part of the object's history. Similarly, when we stop demanding others be perfect to deserve our love, we create relationships that honor imperfection. The Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh demonstrated this during the war, when he cared equally for wounded soldiers on both sides, later explaining, "Real love doesn't take sides, it takes care." Try this 30-day experiment. Each morning, visualize your loved ones surrounded by golden light, while repeating, "May you be happy," whether or not it includes me. Notice how this practice paradoxically deepens connections while relieving their weight. The Karaniya Metta Sutta describes this as the supreme way of living in the world, loving widely without wearing love as handcuffs. Ultimately, loving without needing is the ultimate act of trust in yourself, in others, and in life's unfolding wisdom. As the Buddha taught, in the end, only three things matter: how deeply you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go. Master this, and you'll discover that love becomes not a chain that binds, but wings that set both hearts free. The wisdom of selective ignorance, the art of strategic disengagement. Imagine standing at the edge of a raging river, watching debris swirl past, twigs, leaves, the occasional broken branch. You could exhaust yourself trying to catch every piece, or you could step back and let the current carry what doesn't matter downstream. This is the essence of selective ignorance, a practice the Buddha called yoniso manasikara, appropriate attention, the discernment to know what deserves your focus and what merits no response at all. Modern cognitive science confirms this ancient wisdom. The average person encounters over 30,000 external stimuli daily, and attempting to process them all leads to what psychologists call attentional bankruptcy, the depletion of mental resources on trivial matters. The Buddhist path offers an alternative, cultivating samadhi, focused awareness, not through sheer effort, but through the radical art of intentional neglect. History offers striking examples of this principle in action. When Mahatma Gandhi was asked why he didn't respond to his critics, he replied, "An unjust criticism is like a barking dog. It interrupts your walk only if you stop to argue with it." Neuroscience now explains why this approach works. When we ignore provocations, our brains undergo what's called extinction learning. The neural pathways associated with reacting weaken each time we choose not to engage. A study at Stanford University found that people who practice selective disengagement from minor conflicts showed a 27% increase in prefrontal cortex activity, the region associated with wise decision-making when facing larger challenges. This isn't avoidance. It's the strategic conservation of energy for what truly matters. The practice of selective ignorance unfolds in three layers of discernment. First comes tactical filtering, asking the Buddha's foundational question, "Is this mine to carry?" Just as senses naturally filter irrelevant stimuli, you don't feel your socks until I mention them. We can train our mental filters through meditation. Second is emotional triage, recognizing that not all battles are equal. The Upakilesa Sutta describes this as distinguishing between the splinter in your eye and the forest in theirs. Modern psychology echoes this in the 5-5-5 rule. Ask if something will matter in 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 years. Finally, there's existential indifference, the profound realization that most opinions are projections, not truths. A groundbreaking Harvard study revealed that 78% of perceived criticisms were actually misinterpretations, what the researchers called the phantom insult phenomenon. Consider the case of a CEO who implemented no-reaction Fridays, one day each week, where he deliberately didn't respond to non-urgent complaints. Within months, his company's productivity soared, while workplace conflicts plummeted. This mirrors the Zen concept of mushin, no mind, the state where we stop feeding energy into unnecessary dramas. Cognitive behavioral therapists now teach a similar practice called stimulus control, where clients learn to disengage from unproductive mental loops. Try this 7-day challenge. Carry 3 coins in your left pocket each time you consciously choose not to engage with something unimportant. Move 1 to your right pocket. By week's end, you'll have physical proof of your reclaimed mental bandwidth, and likely discover that most perceived offenses were never worth your attention to begin with. The Agyi Vachagata Sutta contains a profound metaphor. The enlightened mind is like earth, unmoved by what is placed upon it, whether flowers or filth. When we master selective ignorance, we become that earth, receiving all things but retaining only what nourishes growth. In an age of constant outrage and manufactured crises, this practice becomes revolutionary, not just for personal peace, but as social alchemy that transforms cultural noise back into silence. Ultimately, selective ignorance isn't about knowing less. It's about treasuring more. As the Taoist sage Chuang Tzu observed, the perfect man employs his mind as a mirror. It grasps nothing, it refuses nothing, it receives but doesn't keep. In that sacred refusal to engage every battle, we discover an astonishing truth. Most fights were never ours to fight, and the greatest power often lies in what we choose not to do. The light of gratitude, illuminating the shadows of suffering. Imagine walking through a dark forest at night with a lantern. The light doesn't eliminate the darkness, but it creates a sphere of visibility where you can step safely forward. Gratitude, in the Buddhist tradition, functions much like this lantern, not by denying life's difficulties, but by ensuring they don't monopolize your mental landscape. The Buddha called this practice katanutta, a Pali term that translates not as passive thankfulness, but as active recognition of the good that exists amidst the bad. Modern neuroscience reveals why this orientation is so powerful. Regular gratitude practice decreases activity in the default mode network, the brain's complaint center, while increasing gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, literally rewiring the brain to spot opportunities rather than obstacles. Consider the case of a tsunami survivor who lost everything yet told reporters, "I wake each morning grateful that my children's laughter still fills the air." His words embody the Mangala Sutta's teaching that sabaloke anabirati, discontent with everything, is the true misfortune, while santuthi paramam dhanam, contentment is the supreme wealth. Psychological studies of disaster survivors confirm this paradoxical finding. Those who consciously noted small blessings recovered from trauma 40% faster than those fixated on their losses. Gratitude doesn't erase pain. It prevents pain from erasing everything else. The Buddhist practice of gratitude unfolds in 3 transformative layers. First is basic acknowledgement, the simple act of noticing what isn't wrong. The Anguttara Nikaya instructs monks to reflect daily on 5 often overlooked gifts. I am free from deadly disease today. I have food. I have shelter. I have clean water. I have the Dharma to guide me. Modern positive psychology has adapted this as the 5 blessings exercise, shown to increase life satisfaction by 15% when practiced consistently. Second comes difficult gratitude, finding value in challenges. When a Zen student complained about his difficult teacher, the master responded, "Thank your enemy 3 times daily. Once for testing your patience, once for strengthening your resolve, and once for existing so you may practice compassion." Research on post-traumatic growth shows this reframing ability separates those who collapse under adversity from those who transform through it. The deepest layer is existential gratitude, what Tibetan Buddhists call chod, cutting through, the realization that even suffering serves awakening. A cancer survivor described this as not being grateful for the disease, but grateful through the disease, for how it burned away trivial concerns. Neurologically, this aligns with findings that long-term meditators show increased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for finding meaning in pain. Try this shadow and light journal practice. Each evening, draw a vertical line down a page. On the left, briefly note the day's difficulties, argument with boss. On the right, list corresponding hidden gifts, clarified my boundaries, learned patience. Over time, you'll develop what psychologists call benefit-finding vision, the ability to simultaneously hold pain and gratitude like 2 sides of one coin. Historical figures demonstrate this principle powerfully. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, said his gratitude wasn't for the incarceration, but for what it taught me about myself and humanity. The Theragatha, verses of the elder nuns, contains similar accounts, women who transformed societal oppression into spiritual liberation through grateful reframing. Gratitude's ultimate protection lies in its power to shrink suffering to its actual size. As the Buddha taught in the Bhāllika Sutta, the discontented man hears a bird sing and calls it noise. The grateful man hears the same bird and calls it music. By consciously directing attention to life's sustaining forces, the air in your lungs, the roof overhead, the kindness of strangers, you construct an inner sanctuary that outer circumstances cannot violate. In this light, gratitude becomes not just an emotion, but a form of resistance against the brain's negativity bias, against cultural cynicism, against suffering's tendency to monopolize consciousness. As the Tibetan master Longchenpa wrote, "When you realize all you've been given, the world becomes your teacher." Carry this lantern of gratitude forward and watch as shadows retreat to their proper proportions, present but powerless to extinguish your light. The clarity of right view, seeing through the illusion of expectations. Imagine looking at a tree through a stained glass window. The colors distort its true form, making the branches appear red where they are brown, the leaves blue where they are green. This is how most of us perceive others, not as they actually are, but as we wish or fear them to be, filtered through our own desires, traumas, and fantasies. The Buddha called this distortion vipallasa, cognitive distortion, and he taught samadhi, right view, as the antidote, the clear-eyed willingness to see reality without the filters of expectation. Modern psychology confirms this wisdom. Studies show that 78% of interpersonal disappointment stems not from others' actions, but from the gap between who we imagined them to be and who they actually are. Right view doesn't make us cold or cynical. It frees us to engage with people as they truly exist, not as characters in our personal narratives. Consider the story of a woman who repeatedly forgave her partner's betrayals, each time believing he'll change. Her turning point came when a Buddhist nun asked her, "If you ordered mangoes and received stones every time, how long would you keep blaming the grocer?" This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Alagadupama Sutta, where he compares grasping at illusions to mistaking a rope for a snake. The fear comes not from the object itself, but from our misperception. Research on cognitive behavioral therapy reveals that people who practice evidence-based relating, basing expectations solely on observed behavior, experience 60% fewer interpersonal conflicts than those operating on hope and assumption. Right view is ultimately about respecting others enough to take them at face value, not the face we project onto them. Cultivating right view requires 3 radical acts of clarity. First is the courage of disillusionment, willingly removing the rose-colored glasses through which we view certain people. The Pabbatoppama Sutta teaches that just as mountains can't be wished away, people's core patterns rarely change without deep, sustained effort. Second is the practice of behavioral accounting, keeping a neutral log of actions rather than getting lost in interpretations. For example, instead of, "He's so selfish," note, "He canceled our plans 3 times this month when something better came up." Neuropsychologists find this factual approach activates the brain's logical prefrontal cortex rather than the emotional limbic system. Third is the wisdom of appropriate trust, grading your openness like a smart bank. Some people deserve your emotional savings account, others only a checking account, and a few warrant nothing but a closed vault. History's wisest figures demonstrate this principle. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," he echoed the Buddha's teaching that suffering comes not from people's flaws, but from our refusal to see them clearly. Modern relationship science confirms this. Couples who maintain realistic rather than idealized views of each other report 45% higher long-term satisfaction. Try this 30-day experiment. For each important person in your life, write down 1. One thing they consistently do well. 2. One pattern they consistently repeat. 3. One thing they'll likely never change. Keep this list visible. When disappointment arises, consult it like a reality check. You'll find most pain comes from expecting column 3 to magically become column 1. The Vammika Sutta tells of a man who kept digging up an anthill, searching for treasure that wasn't there. Right view asks us to stop digging, to see the anthill as an anthill, not a potential gold mine. This clarity isn't coldness. It's the foundation for genuine compassion. As Tibetan teacher Choknyi Rinpoche says, real love means seeing the other's limitations and loving them anyway, not pretending those limitations don't exist. In a world addicted to filters, both digital and psychological, right view becomes revolutionary. It protects you not by building walls, but by removing illusions. When you stop expecting water from stone, you're free to either accept the stone as it is or walk calmly to the river. Either way, you'll no longer die of thirst while waiting for reality to match your fantasy. This is the ultimate liberation, to meet the world as it is and yourself as you are, with eyes wide open. The silence of non-reactivity, the unshakable power of stillness. Imagine standing at the edge of a turbulent river, watching debris swirl violently in the current. Jumping in to retrieve every piece would only exhaust you, while remaining on the bank allows the water to carry the debris away on its own. This is the essence of non-reactivity, a practice the Buddha called avidithana, steadfast composure, the ability to witness provocation without being drawn into its energy. Modern neuroscience reveals why this approach is so potent. When we refuse to engage with hostility, we deny the aggressor the dopamine hit. Their brain anticipates from confrontation, effectively extinguishing their behavior through lack of reinforcement. Studies of workplace conflicts show that 72% of bullies escalate when met with resistance, but disengage within 2 to 3 instances of being ignored. Non-reactivity isn't passivity. It's the strategic use of silence as an alchemical force that transforms anger back into emptiness. Consider the case of a high school teacher who faced a student determined to provoke her. Where previous teachers had engaged in power struggles, she simply observed his outbursts with quiet attention, responding only with factual classroom directives. Within weeks, his behavior shifted dramatically, not because she'd controlled him, but because she'd refused to play the expected role in his psychological drama. This mirrors the Buddha's encounter with the angry Brahmin Akasaka, who hurled insults only to find his words met with calm inquiry. If you offer someone a gift and they refuse it, who owns the gift? The Brahmin's realization that his anger remained his own when unmet by reaction demonstrates the core truth of ahirika, non-grasping, the Buddhist principle that most conflicts require at least two participants to sustain themselves. The practice of non-reactive silence unfolds in three transformative layers. First comes physiological regulation, training the body's instinctive fight or flight response through techniques like the Tibetan tension release breath, inhaling deeply while imagining drawing energy up the spine, holding briefly, then exhaling with a silent release. Polygraph research shows this method reduces stress hormone production by 38% during confrontations. Second is cognitive reframing, viewing provocations not as personal attacks, but as behavioral data. The Vitakkasanthana Sutta teaches practitioners to regard hostile words like museum exhibits. Observe this anger artifact from the early insecurity period. Neuropsychology confirms this detached perspective activates the brain's observational networks while quieting emotional centers. The third layer is energetic containment, visualizing an invisible stillness field around your body that absorbs chaotic energy and returns only silence, a technique adapted from Qigong that trauma therapists now use to help clients establish psychological boundaries. History's most effective peacemakers demonstrate this principle. When Mahatma Gandhi was asked how he'd respond to violent opposition, he replied, "With the oxygen of publicity withdrawn, the fire dies out." Modern social media researchers have quantified this effect. Online hate campaigns that receive no engagement lose 83% of their momentum within 48 hours. Similarly, when the Dalai Lama is confronted with aggressive questions, he often responds with smiling silence until the asker rephrases with civility, demonstrating what Buddhist texts call the mirror mind, reflecting energy without absorbing it. Try this 7-day reactivity fast. 1. Carry a small notebook to tally verbal provocations to review. Place a check mark each time you let a comment pass, without engagement. 3. Note how many potential conflicts evaporated through non-participation. You'll likely discover what cognitive scientists have proven. Approximately 68% of perceived offenses lose all power when not fed with reaction. The Samannaphala Sutta describes this phenomenon as the unshakable freedom of the non-responder, comparing it to how Earth receives all things equally yet remains fundamentally unchanged. In our hyper-reactive culture, where every opinion demands immediate rebuttal and every slight warrants retaliation, strategic silence becomes revolutionary. It protects not through resistance, but through radical non-participation, like stepping away from a chessboard mid-game, leaving the aggressor to play alone. As the Zen proverb teaches, don't just do something, sit there. In that conscious stillness lies an invincibility more formidable than any counterattack. For what can truly harm someone who refuses to be moved? The freedom of letting go, the sacred art of release. Imagine holding a burning coal in your hand, the searing pain radiating through your flesh. Common sense dictates dropping it immediately. Yet in relationships, we often cling to toxic connections, mistaking endurance for strength and attachment for love. The Buddha called this upadana, the clinging that fuels suffering, and taught patinasaga, letting go, as the path to liberation. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies show that ending toxic relationships leads to a 42% reduction in cortisol levels and a 23% increase in immune function within just 3 months. Letting go isn't abandonment. It's the courageous acknowledgement that some connections, like chains, exist only to bind us to suffering. Consider the story of a woman who endured her husband's verbal abuse for years, believing her patience would eventually heal him. Her turning point came when a Buddhist nun asked her, "If you saw someone drinking poison every day, would you admire their dedication or beg them to stop?" This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Pabbatappama Sutta, where he compares clinging to harmful relationships to grasping a venomous snake. The tighter we hold, the deeper the poison spreads. Research on trauma bonding reveals why letting go feels so difficult. Toxic relationships create the same neural pathways as addiction, complete with withdrawal symptoms when we attempt to leave. Yet just as the body heals when we stop ingesting toxins, the psyche flourishes when we release what harms it. The practice of letting go unfolds in 3 sacred stages. First comes discernment, the clear-eyed recognition of what truly serves your well-being. The Kanki Sutta teaches the fire test method. Does this relationship warm you without burning you? Modern therapists use similar assessment tools, like the cost-benefit analysis, where clients track how specific connections affect their energy levels over time. Second is grieving, honoring the sorrow of release without romanticizing what was. The Buddhist Maranasati, death contemplation practice, adapts beautifully here, writing a relationship eulogy that acknowledges both the beauty that existed and the necessity of its ending. Finally comes reclamation, what Tibetan Buddhism calls rangjin, self-restoration, the process of gathering back the pieces of yourself that became enmeshed with another. History's wisest figures demonstrate this principle. When Maya Angelou wrote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," she echoed the Buddha's teaching that wisdom lies in seeing clearly, not in hoping blindly. Modern neuroscience confirms that people who practice healthy detachment show increased activity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the brain region associated with wise decision-making when recalling painful relationships. Try this cutting the strings visualization. 1. Sit quietly and imagine the person in question. 2. Visualize the energetic cords connecting you. 3. With each exhale, imagine releasing one strand. 4. Whisper, "I return what's yours. I reclaim what's mine." The Sala Sutta compares letting go to removing an arrow. The initial pain is inevitable, but keeping it embedded guarantees lasting suffering. In our modern world, where toxic relationships often wear the masks of family obligation, romantic destiny, or professional necessity, conscious release becomes the ultimate act of self-respect. As the Zen masters teach, you cannot fill your cup while clutching an empty one. When we finally open our hands, we discover they're now free to receive what truly nourishes. This is the great paradox of letting go. In releasing what was never ours to keep, we gain everything. The power of metta, loving kindness, the alchemy of unconditional goodwill. Imagine standing before a raging fire, not with fear, but with the quiet intention to transform its destructive energy into warmth and light. This is the essence of metta, loving kindness, the Buddhist practice of cultivating unconditional goodwill, not as naive idealism, but as a profound strategy for emotional liberation. The Buddha taught metta as the antidote to hatred, comparing it to salt dissolving in water. The more we infuse our consciousness with genuine care for others, the less room remains for resentment to take root. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies show that regular metta meditation reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while strengthening the vagus nerve, which regulates compassion and emotional resilience. Consider the story of a woman whose ex-husband had betrayed her repeatedly. For years, she harbored fantasies of revenge until she began practicing metta meditation, silently wishing him well from a distance. Over time, she found herself able to say, "May you find peace somewhere far from me." This shift didn't excuse his behavior, but freed her from the prison of bitterness. The Karaniya Metta Sutta describes this transformation. As a mother would risk her life to protect her child, so should we cultivate boundless love for all beings. Research on forgiveness interventions reveals that participants who practiced metta showed a 35% greater reduction in anger than those who underwent traditional therapy. Metta doesn't demand reconciliation. It offers emancipation from the weight of carrying hate. The practice unfolds in 3 radical stages. First is metta for oneself, recognizing that we cannot pour from an empty cup. The Buddha taught that resentment often stems from unhealed wounds, so the meditation begins with the phrase, "May I be happy, may I be safe, may I be free from suffering." Psychologists now use this as a tool for self-compassion, finding it decreases self-criticism by 42% in clinical trials. Second is metta for the neutral, extending care to strangers like the barista who makes your coffee or the driver who lets you merge. This bridges the gap between loved ones and adversaries, training the heart to remain open. Finally comes metta for the difficult, not condoning harm, but recognizing that those who hurt others are often prisoners of their own pain. The Vera Sutta warns, hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone is it healed. A powerful example comes from post-genocide Rwanda, where survivors practiced metta toward perpetrators as part of reconciliation. One woman explained, "I don't forgive because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Brain scans of such practitioners show remarkable activation in the insula, the region linked to empathy, without triggering the distress response typically associated with recalling trauma. Try this metta in motion practice. 1. When encountering someone difficult, silently repeat, "Like me, you seek happiness. Like me, you avoid suffering." 2. Visualize them as a child, innocent before life hardened them. 3. Wish them 3 things. May you be free from anger. May you find clarity. May you cause no more harm. You will notice something extraordinary. Their hold on your psyche loosens, not because they've changed, but because your relationship to the pain has transformed. The Metta Sutta promises those who abide in loving kindness sleep and wake in peace. This isn't poetic metaphor. EEG studies show metta practitioners enter deep, restorative sleep 22% faster than others. In a world where vengeance is often glorified, metta becomes revolutionary. It protects not by building walls, but by dissolving the poison within. As the Tibetan master Shantideva wrote, "Holding anger is like grasping hot coals to throw at others. You are the one who gets burned." When we replace resentment with well-wishing, even at a distance, we reclaim our vitality. The ultimate paradox? Those we release from our hatred often fade into irrelevance, while we emerge lighter, freer, and astonishingly unbreakable. The discipline of mindful consumption, cultivating a sanctuary for the mind. Imagine your mind as a pristine mountain lake, clear, still, and nourishing, to all who encounter it. Now picture pouring buckets of mud, toxins, and debris into its waters. This is the effect of unmindful consumption, the constant intake of negative news, gossip, and digital noise that clouds our mental clarity and poisons our emotional well-being. The Buddha called this ahara, nutriment, teaching that just as we carefully select the food we put into our bodies, we must be equally discerning about what we feed our minds. Modern neuroscience confirms this wisdom. Studies show that exposure to negative news increases cortisol levels by 27%, while gossip triggers the same stress response as physical threat. The practice of mindful consumption isn't about ignorance. It's about recognizing that our attention is the most sacred resource we possess and guarding it accordingly. Consider the case of a journalist who covered traumatic events for years before realizing her anxiety and insomnia stemmed not from the stories themselves, but from her compulsive consumption of them, even during personal time. Her turning point came when she adopted the Buddhist principle of bojjhane matanyutta, knowing moderation in consumption, setting strict boundaries around her media intake. Within weeks, her mental clarity returned, and she found herself reporting with greater depth and compassion. Proof that protecting one's inner peace isn't selfish, but necessary for true service. This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Sabbasava Sutta, where he warns against feeding on mental toxins that breed fear and agitation. Research from the University of California confirms this, showing that people who curate their media consumption experience 35% less anxiety and 20% greater problem-solving ability than those who indulge in endless scrolling. The practice of mindful consumption unfolds in three transformative layers. First is input awareness, recognizing that everything we consume, from social media to casual conversations, leaves an imprint on the psyche. The ancient practice of sati, mindfulness, applies here. Before clicking, watching, or engaging, pause to ask, is this nourishing or depleting? Second is energetic hygiene, creating rituals to cleanse the mind after necessary exposure to negativity, much as we shower after physical labor. The Brahmaviharas, divine abodes, offer a powerful reset. After difficult content, spend 2 minutes radiating metta, loving kindness, to restore equilibrium. Third is conscious curation, what the Buddha called yoniso manasikara, appropriate attention, actively shaping our informational diet with the same care we give to organic food choices. Modern digital minimalism studies show that people who implement such practices report 40% higher life satisfaction and 28% increased productivity. History's wisest minds have practiced this discipline. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not amidst chaos, but in carefully guarded moments of stillness. Similarly, Thich Nhat Hanh famously advised students to close the windows of your senses to the storms outside during personal retreats. Contemporary research on high performers reveals they share this trait. Whether CEOs who avoid morning news or artists who limit social media, they understand that genius requires mental space. Try this mindful consumption challenge for 7 days. 1. Begin each morning with 10 minutes of meditation before any media. 2. Ask 3 questions before engaging with content. Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind? 3. End each day by journaling how different inputs affected your energy. You'll likely discover, as cognitive scientists have shown, that 68% of our habitual consumption provides no value. It simply fills the void we mistake for connection. The Vitakkasanthana Sutta offers the perfect metaphor. Like a gatekeeper screening visitors, the wise person guards the senses. In an age where attention is the new currency, bought, sold, and weaponized. Mindful consumption becomes revolutionary self-defense. It protects not through isolation, but through sacred discernment, creating an inner sanctuary, untouched by the world's chaos. As the Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Choose those words wisely, for yourself and for the mind you call home. The refuge of solitude, the sacred art of strategic withdrawal. Imagine a deep well in the forest. Its waters remain clear and abundant because no one draws from it endlessly. The well periodically receives the gift of stillness, allowing the underground springs to replenish what has been shared. This is the essence of solitude in the Buddhist tradition, not loneliness or isolation, but pavivika, the intentional withdrawal that allows our deepest resources to renew. The Buddha himself famously retreated for 3 months each year during the monsoon season, recognizing that even an enlightened mind requires periods of undiluted stillness. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies show that regular solitude increases gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex by 22%, enhances creativity by 35%, and reduces burnout risk by 40%. In a world that pathologizes being alone, Buddhism reframes solitude as sacred maintenance for the soul, not an escape from others, but a return to oneself. Consider the case of a trauma surgeon who saved countless lives but found herself emotionally depleted. Her breakthrough came when she began taking micro-retreats, 20 minutes of silent sitting in her car between surgeries. Over time, these moments of solitude became like oxygen masks on a plane. I had to secure my own supply before assisting others. This mirrors the Buddha's teaching in the Sankita Sutta, where he compares the mind to a lute. It produces beautiful music only when its strings are neither too tight nor too loose. Research on high-stress professions confirms that workers who practice intentional solitude demonstrate 28% greater emotional resilience and make 30% fewer errors than their constantly connected counterparts. Solitude isn't selfish. It's the foundation of sustainable compassion. The practice of sacred solitude unfolds in 3 essential layers. First is physical withdrawal, creating literal space from external demands. The Aryapariyesana Sutta describes how the Buddha left his palace, not as rejection, but as necessary distance to hear his own wisdom. Modern psychologists call this restorative niche theory, the understanding that everyone needs periods in environments that align with their true nature. Second is mental solitude, what Zen calls shikantaza, just sitting, the art of being present with the raw, unfiltered experience of one's own mind without entertainment or distraction. Brain scans of long-term meditators reveal this practice strengthens the default mode network, the brain's self-referential processing center, leading to greater self-awareness and emotional regulation. Third, it is existential solitude, the profound realization that certain journeys must be walked alone, and that this very aloneness connects us to all who have ever felt the same. The Tibetan Nyingthon, dark retreat, tradition takes this to its extreme, with practitioners spending months in complete darkness to encounter the luminous nature of mind beyond all external reference points. History's most impactful figures have harnessed this power. Beethoven took solitary walks through Vienna's woods with a pencil and paper, capturing melodies whispered by the wind. Maya Angelou rented a sparse hotel room each morning to write, free from domestic distractions. Contemporary research on elite performers shows they average 2.7 hours of deliberate solitude daily, not as escapism, but as the incubation period genius requires. Try this solitude audit for 1 week. 1. Track all time spent truly alone, no devices, inputs, or mental chatter. 2. Note energy levels before and after solitude periods. 3. Identify which activities drain you and which genuinely restore. You'll likely discover what cognitive scientists have proven. Humans need 90 to 120 minutes of daily solitude for optimal functioning. A need our hyper-connected world has pathologized but never eliminated. The Samanyaphala Sutta describes the mature practitioner as one who frequents solitary lodgings in forests and groves, not to reject society, but to return to it whole. In an era that mistakes constant availability for virtue and busyness for worth, strategic solitude becomes revolutionary self-care. It protects not by building walls, but by tending the inner garden that feeds all our relationships. As the Thai forest master Ajahn Chah taught, you are the tree that provides shade. Don't neglect your own roots. When we honor our need for sacred aloneness, we don't disappear from the world. We return to it remade, our cup overflowing rather than perpetually drained. This is the great paradox of solitude. In withdrawing periodically, we ultimately have more to give. The ultimate truth: no self to hurt. Liberation from the illusion of ego. Imagine standing before a mirror, watching as someone hurls insults at your reflection. The words seem directed at you, but in truth, they strike only an image, an ephemeral projection with no substance of its own. This is the essence of anatta, no self. The Buddha's radical teaching that what we call me is not a fixed entity, but a fleeting constellation of thoughts, sensations, and memories. Modern neuroscience confirms this ancient insight. Brain scans reveal no central self location, only ever-changing neural patterns constructing the illusion of continuity. When we realize that insults target not a concrete being, but a mental fabrication, their power dissolves like mist in sunlight. The Zen masters called this muga, no self, the understanding that lets verbal arrows pass through us harmlessly, for there is no solid target to strike. Consider the story of a politician mercilessly attacked in the media. While his staff panicked, he remained unnaturally calm, explaining, "They're criticizing a character called the Senator, a story made of sound bites and projections. That's not who I am when I'm eating breakfast with my daughter." This mirrors the Buddha's encounter with the Brahmin, who cursed him for days, only to collapse in exhaustion when the Buddha asked, "If you host a feast and no one comes, who owns the food?" The Brahmin realized his anger presumed a solid Buddha to hate, an illusion the awakened mind had long seen through. Psychological studies now show that people who grasp this no-self perspective experience 60% less reactivity to insults, their brain scans revealing minimal amygdala activation compared to those strongly identified with their ego. The practice of realizing no self unfolds in 3 liberating stages. First is deconstruction, examining the so-called self, like a scientist analyzing a rainbow. The Anatalakkhana Sutta guides this inquiry. Is form, body, permanent or impermanent? Impermanent. Is what's impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering. Is it fitting to regard what's impermanent and suffering as me or mine? Modern therapy techniques, like internal family systems, mirror this, helping clients see their selves as collections of transient parts rather than monolithic entities. Second is observation, cultivating what's called the witness consciousness in meditation. When insulted, instead of thinking, "I am hurt," one notes, there is a story of being hurt arising. Neuroscience finds this shift activates the brain's prefrontal cortex, observer, while quieting the default mode network, ego center. Third is embodiment, living from awareness itself rather than its contents. The Thai forest master Ajahn Chah demonstrated this when a student angrily criticized him, to which he responded, "I'm glad you came to tell me this. Now I know someone feels this way. But tell me, to whom did you say it?" A powerful modern example comes from hostage survivors who attribute their resilience to realizing the captors hated their idea of me, not my essential being. Brain scans of such individuals show remarkable quiet in the posterior cingulate cortex, the region associated with self-referential thinking. Try this mist meditation when feeling attacked. 1. Imagine yourself as morning mist over a lake. 2. Watch as insults pass through like birds, brief disturbances leaving no mark. 3. Whisper, "This too is empty." As the mist reforms effortlessly, you'll discover what quantum physics and Buddhism agree on. At our most fundamental level, we're more verb than noun, a process, not a thing. The Heart Sutra declares, "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form," not as nihilism, but as the ultimate liberation from taking personally what was never personal to begin with. In a world addicted to identity politics and personal branding, no self-wisdom becomes revolutionary armor. It protects not by thickening the ego's walls, but by revealing they were never there. As the old Zen saying goes, "You're a cloud that's forgotten it's made of sky." Remember this, and no word, no slight, no attack can ever truly touch you, for the target they aim at was always already empty. Your invincible path begins now. These 18 Buddhist lessons are more than teachings. They are your armor against cruelty, your sword to cut through illusions, and your sanctuary when the world feels harsh. Each principle, from mindfulness to non-attachment, from compassion to the radical truth of no self, offers a way to live with unshakable peace. The secret is simple. No one can truly hurt you unless you forget your real nature, aware, boundless, and free. When you integrate even one of these lessons, something extraordinary happens. Insults fade because you no longer absorb them as truth. Pain loosens its grip because you see it as passing weather, not your identity. And over time, you become genuinely untouchable, not because you've built walls, but because you've dissolved the illusions that made you vulnerable in the first place. Your challenge starts today.